everyone, and welcome once again to Geekfest Rants. Today's episode is a little different than our regular episodes. It's about sequels that we believe are better than the original films. Joining us today, we have Michael Sutton, who's been here before a couple of times. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
And our other guest, who is doing his premiere at this co-hosting position, is Michael Conway. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
All right, we are going to start with Mike Sutton, and he's going to pick his first film that he believes might be better than the original.
I'm going to start off with Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. Yes, much better than the first one. Just the story, the feel, it was a little different than the first movie. Like, it always seemed like they were walking around in their pajamas, and I know a lot of people didn't like Voyager. It was too long. Again, I like Wrath of Khan. I thought the story was much better. They pulled back a character from the original series. So we had Ricardo Montalban in there, and it was just done extremely well. It was taken serious. It wasn't comedy. That was one of the reasons I really liked it.
I agree. Definitely, when you watch the first film, it almost feels like they're getting used to all these characters and all these sets, like they're experimenting with Star Trek, which is something you figure that these guys would know by heart. But by the time you get to Wrath of Khan, they know exactly how this works, and they're really good at it. The bad guys are better bad guys than just some bizarre extraterrestrial life form. Khan is a concrete bad guy. And I definitely agree with you as far as Star Trek goes.
2 was much better in almost every aspect. Effects, story. First one is basically based on old scripts they had when at the time they were making a TV movie or making a Star Trek Phase 2 version. They were picking up on that. So really put all the efforts after first movie did make money, but then they suddenly did more feeling into it. Just change the sets, to change the costumes a whole bit.
It's almost like they went back to basics for the second film. It's a simpler story, but it hits the target as opposed to the first one. They were trying to go for an epic, and they kind of missed the target on the first. The second was definitely an improvement.
Yeah, the music too. Back then, James Horner was not really known, and he was picked because he was a good film composer to work with a smaller
But Jerry Goldsmith
budget.
did the first movie, didn't he?
He did. Jerry Goldsmith. It was
you
a good
for
song.
Jerry Goldsmith.
From what I heard, though, is they went for cheaper. They couldn't afford Jerry Goldsmith because the budget got pulled back from the first movie because it wasn't as successful. Wow. So they picked James Horner because he was cheaper, and he was also good at using a smaller score to make it bigger and more grand.
And not to mention the fact that James Horner almost ripped himself off because it's based on the other scores he did in the past.
Stars.
But still.
But if I have to think of a Star Trek theme, other than the basic classic theme or some of the next-gen themes, if I have to think of... I always think of Star Trek 2. It's always that.
You could see the scene that the first appearance of Khan, that whole like the damaged and they're like trying to get up the prefix code. You could hit in the back of your head.
It's definitely something that we talked about in previous podcasts. Some films, the music, it's almost as important as a certain character. For Star Trek 2, this applies.
Exactly. So, hey, Mike, what's your movie?
I like to start with The Road Warrior. Mad Max is a classic movie, don't get me wrong. But on all aspects, I thought The Road Warrior, again, was best. I think the story's better. They put more money into it. The effects were better, what they had. All around, I thought it was a really good movie.
I remember the original Mad Max film. To me, I wasn't that crazy about it. It's super low budget.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, it's an Australian film. It was made in Australia by Australians, so it has a foreign film feel to it. The Road Warrior, on the other hand, feels more like a mainstream American film.
Almost Hollywood.
Action,
more Hollywood than...
Exactly. Even though they're all foreign stars, but the movie just feels like a more typical American action film. And it is more, I mean, to me, it was more entertaining.
Right.
It was grittier. It was just nastier.
Yeah, it seemed they got the better actors to do this one. The first one, which again, I think it was a classic cult movie, so to speak, but they were able to afford professional actors compared to the guy with the
the original. They look like a whole bunch of stuntmen doing the lead acting.
You know, the second director's assistant, they needed a guy to come in, and the guy came in and did what he had to do.
The other fun idea too is they took it to the point where now it's like a post-apocalyptic, where what happened? It was from a cop.
Right.
Just in the backstreet, he lost his wife, and all of a sudden you're in the future. And he's one of the few survivors. It's one of the last V8s, the last powerful cars.
The first one was more of just gangs, but there was some sort of slight post-apocalyptic.
Slight in the future. Now
but this one, you're really out there.
Yeah. This one is, gas is a commodity that nobody has. He's got the last of the V8 Interceptors, the fastest cars that's out there. And it's a little brutal in some scenes.
Yes. Definitely. Don't get me wrong. When they run over his legs, which is what causes the limp on the
and
second
his
film,
arms,
it's pretty brutal.
Go, oh, that
right. But the second one has even the location. It's still the desert, but it feels a little more epic than the first.
You almost feel the sand when you're watching him compared to the first one, I think.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, back to you, Carlos. What do you think?
Well, let me give you my first film is Silence of the Lambs. Now, this is a weird film because a lot of people might say, well, wait a minute. That was the first time we ever saw Hannibal. But it's like
Red Dragon or Hannibal.
Right, but this is definitely the first time we see Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal. However, the film is technically a sequel to an earlier film from the 80s called Manhunter, which was directed by Michael Mann, where a different actor, Brian Cox, plays the character of Hannibal Lecter. I remember the first film. It's not a bad film. It's just not a memorable film. It didn't make the impact or the box office success that something like Silence of the Lambs did. William Peterson, I believe, played the lead cop.
Right.
By the time you get to Silence of the Lambs, the lead cop is Jodie Foster, which won Oscars, tons of Oscars for the film, and some of the actors won it, and it was a hugely popular film. Much better, different pacing. Michael Mann films are different, and when you have certain of his films that are big in scope, films like Last of the Mohicans, films like Heat,
right?
These films that feel big. Manhunter was a rather small feeling film. It's a cop crime story, obviously. The character of Hannibal wasn't as big in the original film. Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter is the star of the film.
Right.
He steals the movie from
Anthony
everybody.
Hopkins took him as, even though he did 30 years worth of movies, that point on, you think of a movie of Anthony Hopkins first, and the one you can think of is Hannibal Lecter.
Especially in America. I'm sure in England he was a big shot, for a long time. And his name did show up in American films here or there, but this is the movie that made him a superstar and made his character an iconic villain.
He won an Oscar for it. He won everything for it.
Again, the movie was great, very entertaining, and it also spawned its own set of sequels down the line, but it really blew away the first film.
Next movie I'm going to pick is X-Men 2. I like this movie better than the first one. I mean, the first one's an origin story. Yes, great. I've been a comic book reader, as we know, and anybody who's been listening to the casts, I've been reading for a long time. But X-Men 2 started to go into the way of the X-Men, and because they're mutants, now they're being hunted, which goes back to the point of the books where they were the outcasts and people feared the X-Men. And also brought in Wolverine, the best at what he does, where he actually starts cutting loose. So as a comic fan, that's something that we love to see in the big screen. And then the ending also led up to possibly having a really good third X-Men movie. We had the Dark Phoenix or the Phoenix Rising. It was something like that.
That's the difficulty. When you make a so-called trilogy or more than trilogy, the third part, 9 times out of 10, is the weakest movie of the three.
That still made the second one good. We were hoping it was going to get set up to something even bigger and better. But even the story, the pacing, just everything about the movie.
It's a much slicker film. And because it's not the first one, it doesn't have to waste as much time on origin-related material.
Yeah, you could jump right into the story.
Yeah, you can skip a whole bunch of... Now, granted, there are a couple of new characters that we meet, and we learn how they became what they are, but we don't spend as much time as we did on the first one. Right. Also, this film allows Wolverine to explore him a lot more, which
led to a Wolverine movie.
Right, and each film keeps giving Wolverine more and more time. He's becoming more of a central character, as opposed to the first film that he's one of a lot of characters. And as we move forward in this trilogy, at least, it becomes more about Wolverine. And yes, you're right, it does bring you to the third film, but when you compare it to the first, it's a much slicker, much better polished film. It moves faster. The action is much better.
Just Nightcrawler in the beginning, the way
that opening sequence in the White House.
In the White House,
excellent.
Just teleporting and bamfing.
But you could also say the third X-Men movie, since it wasn't directed by Bryan Singer, you could say that slipped a bit there too.
Right. It's easy to blame. Yeah, it's easy to do that. But if we only compare it to the first, it's a definite improvement. Right. I love the first film, but the second one is better. As far as I'm concerned, you can't get away from the fact that it's a much better product that was put out.
See, but as I told Mike before, I personally like the first one. Mm-hmm. The second movie had better effects. They might have been sharper because they were used to working with the actors, so they know what they're doing more or less. But I personally like the first movie for the story, and I think story is very important, even though you're talking about a science fiction or...
But again, that's why the second movie had a good story. It was good.
It was good, but I don't think it was as good as the first one.
Being hunted, and it's setting up for what the point of the X-Men were.
Okay, well, I still think the first one's technically better.
Well, Mike, since it looks like you're not winning that argument, I'll let you pick the next movie.
I didn't say that. Okay, I'm going to be the only one in this room to say Back to the Future 2 was better than the first one.
Ugh.
I personally, I have a personal sci-fi person all my life, and I have a special for time travel movies. one way or another. I like the way they integrated the second one into the first one, and the first one, like some things that are going on that you see in the first.
Very
second
clever,
movie.
very
but
clever.
Okay, that took place in the first movie, like you see Marty meeting Marty in the first movie, or Marty, overlapping Biff. Yeah, when Biff meets his so-called grandfather Biff compared to Biff from the 50s, and I personally like that. If it makes sense.
And he steals the book so he can become rich.
Nothing can be as good as a science fiction movie if it's a good time travel movie compared to a bad time travel movie.
It's hard to believe that the first and the second were not shot back to back as opposed to the second and third.
Right.
And to keep track of all those specific details of how one thing leads to another, and they replicated it on the second film. That's excellent.
And Zemeckis did all three, so I think that's why it worked, more or less. Again, third part, I feel was weakest of the three, but we're not talking about that right now. I personally like the overlap and, walking around the Marty. You can't see Marty over there, but if he sees you, it's going to call that time paradox problem. Yeah. So I personally like the second one more than the first one. The first one had more heart. You could say he was cutesy. He got his parents together, and he also opened the picture at the end. The only thing is, I think wish they had Crispin Glover to come back for the second one.
Yeah, they couldn't do that.
That's
right.
what missed.
To me, my favorite one is still the first one. Even though it is the time travel story, it's a little easier and not as convoluted as the second. I still like the second, not as much as the first, and definitely more than the third. As far as I'm concerned, it's 1, 2, and 3, the order of how these movies go. But the second one does have such cool future stuff. I love all that future stuff. And the interacting of the same characters meeting each other and meeting their parents in the future scenario, and then the whole ending, as you mentioned before, where they do go back to the 50s, and it's amazing. They reshot part of this first film so that it interacts with the second film.
Also, there's a different Jennifer from the first one.
Yeah, you have a different actress, and like you said, you don't have Glover, unfortunately.
Was it Elizabeth Shue showed up in the second one?
Just as she started the second and third one, she wasn't in the first one.
She wasn't in the first.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I still like the first one. Again, sentimental, the original. I always like more of the original films, even though I know the topic is the second ones are better. But I just thought it was better. Again, just the idea, go back how the past got changed so much that he could just disappear, not even exist anymore.
Lots of little details in the future of the future movie, like Jaws 3D or something. And
Jaws 12 and 3D.
And it's funny because recently there were a lot of articles on the internet about how Back to the Future 2 is inaccurate or accurate. In other words,
I'm
what
still
things
waiting for the
came
hover
true.
cars.
Yeah, the hover cars and the shoes that
the
drive
hoverboards
and attach to themselves.
And the hoverboard, yeah.
But it's funny because they were touting 3D films, and now it's 3D films we're dealing with. So they got some stuff right.
That's another reason why I don't like it. 3D films, but that's another topic.
Them for the 3D?
Gotta blame
somebody.
I
blame Jaws 3D on the 3D movie. Sorry. Back to you, Carlos. What do you think next?
Well, my next film is one of my favorite films, which is Aliens, sequel to Alien. Now,
game over, man. Game over.
Again, we're dealing with one of these films where the first one, I love the first one.
The first one is a classic. The first one is a classic.
Yes, it is a classic, but it's a straight horror film. A suspense horror film.
Sci-fi overtone.
The second one is an action film. It's based obviously on the events of the first film, but it brings it over as an action film. James Cameron takes over the directing of this film as opposed to the original Ridley Scott, and he gives it a different flavor. He brings in his own touch to the film, his own signature, which is heavy sci-fi action, the type of stuff he will later do on Terminator 2, he does here initially. It's just, from beginning to end, it's his film. It has his classic double ending where you think the movie's over and then you have another 10-15 minutes of, oh my god, what just happened, and you get more of it. The characters are very memorable. The action, the special effects are amazing for their time. Now we're talking 1986 here, but it is such a good film to me that everything that followed in that line of films, it completely falls apart.
If you have the biology or the Blu-ray set, you're going to stop after 1 and 2. You got to watch right away. 3 and 4, I got the set. I still haven't watched 3 and 4.
Unfortunately, I've seen them, and especially 3. I hate 3 so much, and it's painful to hate 3 because I love that director. The work that David Fincher did after 3, I absolutely love, but in 3...
But in 3, did he prove the so-called...
No. There's a lot of controversy about 3 because he, I believe, feels that the studio took the movie away from him and edited it on their own. He didn't participate in the editing.
But you also had the problem where you had the actors strike, and then everything was filmed over in England, and he got, I think, cut down on the time of filming and writing and the budget.
No, nothing, in my opinion, could have saved number 3.
Yeah, the story itself. But again, it's because you're coming off 2. You're coming off Aliens, and Aliens...
You're coming off Alien and Aliens. You have both
Right.
of them to compare to.
When you leave Alien... you don't then go to Aliens and destroy what just took place in Alien. You don't just stomp all over the who survived this film comes over to the next film. And that's my biggest problem is the way you wrap up the movie Aliens and then you move on to the next chapter, they basically stomp all over Aliens. They're like, it's a congratulations, you did a great job. It's all crap. Move on.
Hicks died.
Hicks,
Newt died.
Just about everybody they kill off the bat because
Bishop was there, what, for 20 seconds?
And I can't tell. Did they kill them because they thought it would make good sense in the story, or because we couldn't get so and so?
No, I think
do this?
they basically only weave another $10 million. So
Okay, let's go back to Aliens. You guys now moved to Alien 3.
I know.
You're
I
right.
still
You're right.
think we moved on, but my opinion, Alien is better than Aliens.
Alien is a classic movie.
It's a
it's
first
a great
one.
classic. Really, Scott should be proud of that movie.
I can't compare the both and say which one's better because they're two different genres. Like you said, one's a horror, one's an action adventure. Which one I enjoy more?
Which entertains the most? Which is more enjoyable? To me, it's Aliens.
Alien, when I saw it in the movie, scared the crap out of me because you didn't know when it was going to pop out. And for the special effects in the late 70s was really good. And even the writing was
They had to
good.
worry about the one alien compared to the army of Marines attacking the army of aliens.
Don't get me wrong. I love Aliens, but I thought Alien was made much better. The simpler, the sets, it was suspense. You didn't see everything right away. It built it up more.
Yeah, but still kinds of boost the shark. They didn't get the alien to work till the end, so that's why he was always in shadows and you hardly saw him.
You know what? It's a shame that Mike is incorrect about this, but let's let him continue.
Okay,
with his next film.
so I'm right about this one. You say you're right about the other one.
And the other one. So, all right. Well, I'm going to move on to
So it's a tie. So.
Dawn of the Dead. Again, think that one was better. We all loved the first one, but I think the second one being a little more modern. It's in the mall.
You're talking about the 1978 version.
Of course, the 70s, not the remakes. Again, that's
the remake was all right.
podcast.
I enjoyed the remake.
remake.
No, we're talking about the
We're talking about the
original.
original.
We're talking about the originals. Again, it was more of just the idea and the premise that if you're really going to have to fight off zombies, and where would you board yourself up and how can you survive? Well, you know what? A mall almost makes sense. There's all of them out there. You can lock up all the doors. There's clothing, there's supplies, there's some food. It made sense to actually go there. So it made some logic was there.
That movie expanded on the mythology of the zombie film. Now, you remember, the zombie film is invented by George Romero in his first film. And not a lot of people jumped on that right away.
No.
And this was a big jump because the first one was from the 60s. This one is from the late 70s, I believe.
78, I believe. And the first one was, what, 68, maybe?
68,
That
probably.
68. It's in
68,
black and white.
And
it's
the
more
first
of a
one it focuses more,
social-
it's actually more about like social,
Right.
racial
Racial,
overtones about black and white type of stuff. The second one is more about consumerism, and it's about, I'm told, and the critics dissect the movie in a way where it's like, yeah, people come to these malls, they don't even know why they come. They're like zombies coming to the mall, and they all know, and it's worked into the movie. They say, why are they coming here? Because that's all they know how to do.
all they know.
They know they have to go shopping and they have to go buy their stuff, and it's worked into the movie. And again, the usual formula is not so much about the zombies, it's about how the people that are surviving, how they kind of turn on each other and destroy themselves in the process of trying to survive. And it's a definite improvement over the first film. Not just in the fact that you're going from black and white to color, but the
more money.
pace of the story. You know, even though it was kind of it's an independent film, obviously, because his films are usually independent films, but it's slicker than the first one. There's more
Just
action.
have the white makeup and the black on the eyes and walk slow.
And you have a big set. In other words, you're not
Not
confined to
one
one
house.
house.
Yeah.
You're in an entire mall. And it's a good setting because it's like, you people wonder, what would happen if I'm stuck in a mall? There's so many cool things
And you're
to
still
do.
like trapped in that house, a bigger house.
Right. And that's part of what the movie explores. At first, you're kind of like in a great place that you always wanted to be trapped in, but then they kind of realize that they start to lose their mind. They're trapped in
they're trapped no
they're in
matter-
a cell. They're in a jail, basically, because they're still trapped
You're
in
still
place.
trapped. You still can't get out.
But it's a great sequel. It's definitely an improvement, like I said, on the original. The original is great, but it's an improvement on it.
And the special effects,
Oh.
George Romero, they now you got color.
Well, he's got Tom Savini at this
Tom
point.
Savini also.
And they go berserk.
Again, it's not just the white makeup and the black
No,
on the
now
eyes.
you're
and-
dealing with gore.
Until you walk around slowly.
Modern
No,
gore
You started with
films.
modern
Yeah.
gore, and where he was great when they ripped the guy apart in the intestines.
they
Yes,
do.
it's disgusting, but
Spoiler
it's
alert.
fun. Spoiler alert. Yeah, but it's fun. It's fun to listen to and watch. So, Mike, you got another one?
I got Toy Story 2.
Ah.
A lot of people was, again, sentimental with the first Toy Story, and I could see that point very strongly. I enjoyed Toy Story 1. But ultimately, you could tell, besides the computer animation difference within the years.
That's right.
It may not have been many years, but you could tell more so-called pixels, more better computers were made and the programmers was better. But generally speaking, I'm talking about the story.
Yes.
I think the story, the kid that loves this toy is growing up. Okay, that was cute. That was sentimental in the first one. But I also like the whole story of the second one with the collector. It takes what the world is like today. Can't take it out of the box. Guys, so one of the main characters, Kelsey Grammer's character, he said, is talking through his box. He's not even getting out of the box because you can't take things out of the box.
Yeah, the prospector?
Stinky Pete.
Stinky Pete, exactly. It's the prospector, exactly. And he's like, all these collectors, Michael, Carlos.
No,
I didn't take the tags, and I admit a lot
Guilty.
of my stuff stays in the package.
I'd rather play with my toys. I want to play with the action figures. I'm sorry. I keep the few I have on the shelf and very nicely. It's not a museum piece. I want to play with my toys. But again, the story of Toy Story 2, I thought was very cleverly done, and the computer animation, it's amazing what Pixar does from one movie to the next movie.
yeah.
You could see, especially on the big screen, you could see the difference, the details in the backgrounds and the foregrounds. It's amazing.
I definitely agree. The film to me has like two levels. The first level is the character development. You get introduced to these characters in the first film, and now the second film, they meet new people. There's like a slight romantic interest, if you will, with Jesse.
Right.
And you got more characters, they're more developed. But then you add this whole other thing about toy collecting, which again, certain people like myself and a couple people I know, it's like, oh, wait a minute, hold on a second. What are you trying to say about toy collecting? And it's true. They go into the whole big toy stores and the interaction with the material that you have there. You have the crazy collectors who are fixing things and keeping them and selling them and watching out for junkyards, yard sales and stuff like that. I made a better connection with this film than the first one. Once again, we keep saying this. First one is excellent. This one is better. It's a better, more personal story as far as I'm concerned.
I still like the first one. It's just the idea.
Mr.
The
Sentimental
first one,
over here.
number one, is do you ever think when you leave the room and your toys come alive? I thought that was a great idea. Number two, just exploring the point of you have the favorite toy, which was Woody, and now you introduce Buzz. Now he's the new favorite toy. Well, what would your old toy think about that? Oh, I'm going to be number two now. Wait, Woody's the toy, not Buzz. Just something you never thought about, and I thought that was a cool way to bring into...
Let's get over it. Buzz was an all-around cooler toy to have as a kid. No offense.
What, cowboys aren't cool?
Maybe
Yes,
50
we
years
know it's
ago.
not. I was going to say 50 years ago, yeah. Yes, space toys are better for us for our generation.
But, obviously, the boy loved Woody more. No matter what he says at the end.
So you're saying if you had your old G.I. Joes that were 12 inches and you got your new G.I. Joes, the new G.I. Joes are better?
I think 12-inch G.I. Joes blows away the 3-inch
Okay, see,
G.I.
that's
Joes.
why you should like Woody better. That's why you should like the first one.
But the thing about the second film is also that you start to see the slight departure. Like the boy's getting older. He's starting to kind of slowly back away from some of these toys. By the time you get to the third, that's a whole other thing that we can't talk about right now, but it continues this whole relationship between, in other words, it's not the same. You don't go from 1 to 2, him feeling the same way about the toys, but you can't create rules for it because it's all fantasy.
Right.
But the relationship that the boy has from
With the toy.
the reality, how he feels about the toys, you see a progression. In the first film, his toys are his life. The second film, he starts to kind of take a little step. He's getting older.
Yeah, because a lot of toys were stuck on the box, but he still had Woody and he still had Buzz.
Right. He still holds on to his favorites and his most sentimental ones.
Well, that's why I like the first one. It's the sentimentality. It's your first toy that you always loved as a kid, and you're always going to have a favorite. And it's always going to be Buzz. Sorry, Woody. It's not going to be Buzz. It's always going to be Woody. See, now you guys got me trying to convert.
It's working. It's working.
Evil plot rules. Okay, back to you, Carlos.
Alrighty. My next film is Tron Legacy. Pretty current film. We've actually done an entire 2-part show.
I'm sorry, I can't listen to this because I have not seen. I'm one of the few people probably out there not seen it.
That's fine.
But I just got the Blu-ray, so I
That's
gotta see when it
fine.
goes.
One less person to disagree with. I'm all for that. But
Got the
but I
3D
know that-
glasses?
I know that Mike saw it, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a superior film to the first one. It is technically a sequel
The
because
scenes I saw, I would have to agree with you.
Well, again, you can't compare your 70s to the 2000s.
almost
Come on.
30 years of improvements.
When the
and
first one
special
come out in
effects.
82?
82. Same
82.
year as Star Trek 2, as
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan, yeah. The effects are a million times better, obviously. The story is better. It's not a perfect film in terms of, it's not an Academy Award-winning story,
Like,
but I
it was the
found
first
it
one.
incredibly entertaining. It's a popcorn film. It's fun. The kids love it. I took my kids. They loved it. I loved it. One way I've described it to a friend of mine was like, we're big Star Wars fans, and it's like, it's not Star Wars material, but it has the fun of Star Wars. It doesn't have the heart of Star Wars. It's a fun movie to see. The visuals are excellent, and it's just a fun movie. And it continues the story of the first one. The first one has, to me, when I remember seeing it, and even when I saw it again, it has these very slow points that you're kind of like, all right, keep going, move on, let's see some action stuff. And this movie has a little of that too. There are certain points in this movie where they're telling you the plot. And this means this, and this means that, and you're kind of like, okay, well, that's good. Let's just move on to some action.
You're talking about dumbing down movies, so the general public that didn't see the first movie might help too, because that's what people do now.
Right, and it's such an older movie that a lot of people maybe haven't seen it, or they had to go run to the video store to rent it because it's such an older movie.
The average 15-year-old that's going to see this kind of movie, so to speak, what I think they're aiming for to buy the tickets. 15 years ago, guess what? The movie... It just came out in 82. They wasn't even born yet. So it's like most of them probably never even heard that.
No. But not only that, not only is that true, but I remember we talked about this, Mike, that when they were promoting this film, they were downplaying the original. The original didn't come out on Blu-ray until a few weeks ago. And we were wondering, the big geeks who have seen the original were like, well, how come they're not tying in the old movie and a release for the new movie? Because they were afraid, I believe. You have your core cult film geek crowd who likes the original, but the majority of the people didn't like the original. The original was technically a bomb. It was a bomb. It was a bomb.
It was a bomb.
It was an awful year for it to come out.
In the movies, it was a bomb.
Yeah, I knew that Bridges was coming back for the sequel, so to speak. I did not know that Bruce Boxleitner, who had a big part in the first movie, wasn't even in the sequel. Though I saw a scene. This happened to catch the reviews one time. And, Bruce Boxleitner.
Right.
Is in it.
But I think it was a double-edged sword. They wanted the cult geek crowd to come and see it, but they didn't want to scare the new kids who have never heard of this movie. They didn't want to scare them with the older movie.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That's why it's not called Tron 2.
And it worked.
Because they called it Tron Legacy. There's a difference.
I think you're right, because if you pull in the old movie, the original movie, people look and say, that looks so bad, it looks so stupid.
It's iconic,
they're not going to watch the
second
one.
It's too
But again...
much.
That's what Hollywood's doing anyway with all these movies, the A.T. movies. Adults that have kids now, they remember when they were kids watching the A.T. movie on TV, now they're making an A.T. movie.
Well, with a movie like The A-Team, they're trying to capitalize on a feeling. They're not capitalizing on the entire series, because if you sit down and watch The A-Team, like unfortunately I'm doing right now with my kids, these episodes are awful. They're god-awful episodes.
Did your kids like the TV show?
They love it.
Did they watch the movie?
Kyle watched the movie. Amanda did.
Okay, does Kyle like the movie?
He loved the movie, and both the kids love the original show. They think it's the funniest thing ever. But to me, it's really bad. It's dated, and it's corny.
Yeah.
But your son liked
But for that age, that's
Terminator
the trick.
2 better than Terminator 1.
I think it's the age. When you're watching the A-Team, when you're 11, 10, 12, 14 years old, it's different than if you're watching the A-Team at our age, completely jaded by modern films and reality. Right. Films that are more realistic than a TV series that nobody ever gets shot. Watching G.I. Joe cartoon for real. It's like, okay, here we go.
Yeah, nobody dies because they all pop out in parachute. Yeah, but everybody flips in Jeeps. They all have roll cages. It was easy to figure out what car was going to
that's why they had to flip to the side, but the Dukes of Hazzard, they had to flip straight up in the air and land on all four wheels. But that was the problem.
Again, that brings us back to why I believe that they try to stay away from connecting Tron Legacy too much with the original Tron. They wanted the perks, but they didn't want the backlash. But in this case, it worked. The movie was successful enough for them. There's probably going to be a sequel. And now, after they realized it was a hit, they released the Blu-ray of the original. They're like, okay, it's safe now to release it. We're not embarrassed of it anymore. Well, this brings us to the end of part 1 of our sequels that are better than the original special. Please join us again next week for part 2, where we will continue to go down the list of some more sequels that are better than the originals. So until next time, see you soon here on Geekfest Rants.
What's wrong with my chicken?
What did you call me, Griff?
Chicken!